Okay, well, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for making it to the meeting and dealing with technology. I'm so glad that, so glad to see everyone's faces today. As you saw in the email, I think you're going to enjoy today's program. We're going to be talking about, we're continuing our history of the book unit, but instead of talking about handwritten pieces like we did last week, this week we're going to talk about print and the dawn of print, and then some of the interesting experiences that occurred during throughout this long history of print that we're still in, because of course print is a human experience, and human experiences are riddled with mistakes and odd things and strange things and funny things. So we're going to get a chance to get into that. But before we do, we know that our first thing is our Where's Andrew and Where's Daniel segment. Looks like Andrew has a interesting place for us. This one looks more like a museum type space.
It is a museum about a particular book, and they have a copy of it with a misprint that's well known. So it's slightly different.
It's different? Okay, we're like all trying to read these examples.
Yeah, we're all craning to try and see if we can make any of the small print behind you. So it looks like, are there objects in the cases? It looks like there are.
I believe so.
Okay, huh. And it's all about one particular book?
One particular book.
Okay, geographic part of the world?
North America.
Okay. And it has a misprint. Andrew said.
At least one of the editions of a book has a famous misprint.
Has a famous misprint.
The book, okay. You said North America.
North America.
United States?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Washington, D.C. area?
No.
Oh, I bet it's somewhere in New England, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
Andrew, I have a question. Is this the only copy of this misprint?
No. There are several copies of this misprint around the world. However, all the others are in like the New York Public Library or Oxford or Cambridge, and they'd be much too easy to guess. So this was the only sort of more random place that has a copy.
Oh.
Is it in the Southeast?
Sort of, yes.
Sort of, okay.
So is the book featured in the museum, is it a Bible?
Yes.
Okay. So I wonder if it's the Wicked Bible.
It actually is.
Okay. I still haven't figured out though where this museum is. Okay, I wonder who has one, because you're right. I know that the usual suspects will have a copy, like you said, but
It's not in Florida, is it?
No. It is not.
Because I know that there's like a Bible museum, I think, in Florida.
It's west of Florida. I don't quite know whether or not to call it
Texas.
South. It is in Texas.
Harry Ransom Center?
Yeah.
What is it? Could you repeat that?
Go ahead, Draylen.
Oh, well, Tamara and I were both thinking the Harry Ransom Center.
No.
Oh, man.
Historic New Orleans collection?
No.
But it is in Texas.
It is in Texas.
All right, come on, guys. Where's our Texas experts? All I know is the Harry Ransom Library.
University of Houston Library.
It is in Houston, but not the University of Houston.
Whoa, good job, Draylen.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm totally clueless from there. I have no idea what's in Houston.
I know, I think I've exhausted my...
But we got pretty close.
Yeah, we got right.
I'm gonna put my thing in the chat. It is the Dunham Bible Museum at the Houston Baptist University.
Wow. Wow.
How fascinating. That is a fascinating find.
That is.
It just reminds me how, you never know when you're going to find an amazing, rare book anywhere in the world, really. That's fascinating.
That is. So Andrew, you put your, okay, perfect. You put your handout in the chat. Great. So for those who don't know, Andrew is now doing handouts for for all of his Where's Andrew features, so we can learn about these places that he's choosing, and which is wonderful. So be sure to download that from the chat. Thank you so much, Andrew. That was perfect, because I didn't know if this week would be difficult for you to find something. So thank you so much. Okay, so what I want to do is start off this week by reading an excerpt of one of my, I'm still reading it, but one of my favorite books about the history of print. And I'm just going to read a couple sentences. This book is called Printer's Error, and it's by J.P. Romney and Rebecca Romney. Rebecca Romney is a bookseller and one of the co-founders of Type Punch Matrix Book Company. But they wrote this really interesting book on all of the craziness that has occurred in the history of print. And I'm just going to read a couple sentences from the intro because it's going to inform our session today. This is an irreverent history. Sure, to most of us, a history about the printed word sounds dignified. After all, the printing press has recorded and spread some of the greatest achievements of humankind. But remember, humankind is also full of idiots. Ridiculous decisions, weird coincidences, and absurd stories are no strangers to our species. The history of the printed word reveals our capacity for brilliance, but it also reveals our capacity for blunder. So I just wanted to read that because I think that's a really fun way to get interested in the history of print. It's definitely not a boring story. First thing we're going to do then is I'm going to try this poll that I created. I made a little trivia game, history of print trivia. So I'm going to try to do this, and hopefully I can figure out how to do multiple questions. I'm going to launch this poll and just try your best. These are just questions that I thought would be challenging, but also not too challenging. It's okay if you don't know them. We're just going to, have some fun. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's try, sorry. I'm hoping everybody can see this. So question 1, printing originated in which country? And there's a multiple choice: Italy, Germany, China, or Japan. Okay. All righty. So I think I'm going to continue scrolling and hopefully y'all can. Okay. The first English printer was William Tyndale, William Morris, William Caxton. Okay. Here we go. The old book smell in wood pulp paper comes from an organic polymer known as melanin, suberin, or lignin. All right, number 4, the term incunabula refers to books printed before 1501, 1450, 1600, and 1601. Last question. The following materials have been used to make and bind books: underwear, human skin, other books, or all of the above.
Oh, Joelle, that's a good question.
Yes, I made up these questions, so hopefully y'all are okay with them. And
I think she learned that one from the master, Bob.
Okay, so has everyone who, oh yeah, continue. Want to make sure everyone who wants to vote has a chance to vote or try, and we'll go over it. Okay, has everyone had a chance to vote who wants to vote? Good, okay. So now I'm going to end the polling. Okay, so printing originated in which country? So we are almost, so Germany won out and we're almost half and half with Germany and China, and the answer is China. So we're going to talk about the complexity of that and why that can be confusing, but it really is China. Okay, the first English.
Are you talking about dishes? China?
China? Oh, no, not
Ex-English teacher, ex-English teacher.
Oh, yes, I've got my little student over here who needs a little extra explanation. Okay, so the next one, I was kind of mean. I decided to do all Williams to make it difficult. But who's considered the first English printer is William Caxton, which most people said. But William Tyndale was very important too, for a different reason. But so that one is a hard one. But William Tyndale we can thank for for really being the first one to do I guess a translation of the Bible in English. Or one of the first. So that's where you probably have heard his name before, and he was martyred for it as well. Okay, the old book smell and wood pulp paper comes from an organic polymer known as, and the answer is lignin, as most people said. Melanid and suberin, I think those are also organic polymers, I believe, but lignin is the one that you're going to find that really produces that kind of earthy, almost vanilla-like smell in wood pulp paper. And if you ever purchase archival materials, you're going to notice that they don't only say acid-free and buffered, but they'll also say lignin-free. All right, the term incunabula refers to books printed before. This is a tough one. We had a tie here, but it's books printed before 1501. So incunabula refers to kind of, I think the Latin translation of it is really in the cradle. So that means books that were printed around the dawn of printing in Europe. So they were like the printing infants, I guess. So that's where that comes from. And then the last one, 100% of folks got this one. You are exactly right. Underwear, human skin, and other books have all been used to make and bind books. So good job on that one. Okay, so now you can kind of see where we all landed. But y'all did great, because I know these are things that you know, may not know, but I just figured it would be kind of a fun way to get us started. So, Mr. Williams, I'd like to, since kind of following up on question 1, because I know that can be a confusing one where we talk about where printing originated. So printing originated really, relief printing in China in about the 9th century on woodblock printing. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, everybody who said Germany is right too. Because China developed what we're going to call block printing.
Right.
And it is, rather than a single letter, interchangeable, there were pictographs or a whole concept of writing in one piece of a wood printing block. In the German aspect, which took place in Nuremberg, was because it was a major gold refining company, and the goldsmiths were there. They developed the idea from the punch mark from making gold pieces. And so they developed the first interchangeable type.
Right. And I've read in a couple texts that there was experimentation of movable type in Asia earlier, but that would have been independent of what was going on in Germany. And I don't know if movable type works for Asian languages
Well,
as well.
it does today, but it probably would not have worked then because the writing styles were much different than what we use.
Right.
What the Germans developed was a peculiar thing. And I'm not certain that they would have developed it as easily. They developed the idea because Goldsmith had to hallmark their products, so it could be officially called 20 karat gold, 22 karat gold, because you're not going to buy something in gold if you don't know what the quality is. And so the law in Germany, in the German states, was it had to be hallmarked. It had a maker's mark, a city mark, a assayer's mark, and a date, all of which would allow you to be able to verify when it was made. So the Germans were able to use interchangeable typefaces or matrices, sorry, I'll use a good word, the matrices for making their gold standard. Someone in Germany, certainly probably in Mainz, decided that you could use letters interchangeably too. And since they had a format for making the basic things for hallmarks or punching gold products, they developed it from that. Now, the Chinese may have done it, but the Chinese were accustomed to making their money in two forms. They were very early were the makers of paper money too. But there was a block print on that, you see. But in Germany, they could make an interchangeable. It just happened to be one of those serendipitous moments in the world where people made, oh, I see.
Right. And which
and
is
most things Joellen did not develop because somebody sat around in an academic committee and said, let's see if we can't solve this. Because the truthfully is, academic committees haven't solved many problems yet. But I'm sorry I can say that I'm retired. But but the fact is that sometimes things just happen because someone saw the possibility.
Sure.
Did that help?
It does help. And I think it helps us understand and contextualize Gutenberg better. And, you know, oh, and yes, thank you so much, Tamika. I actually bought that book when you told me about it. So I have it in my office. And he goes into great detail. So we should be able to, goes into really a great detail. Now, one thing that is interesting about Gutenberg, who we attribute to the development of movable type in Europe, in Mainz, Germany, is that, first of all, he has quite a name. We all just used to calling him Gutenberg. His full name was Johannes Geinsfleisch zur Leyden zum Gutenberg. So quite a name. But interestingly enough, he didn't really print a whole lot about himself. We know relatively little about Gutenberg. I think we know a lot about him because of the lawsuits he was involved in, because of the printing press, with people that I think he partnered with. So it's almost ironic that we don't know a whole lot about the inventor of print in Germany because he didn't print a whole lot about himself. So I find that to be really interesting. Okay, so I've got a couple images that I want to show as usual with some things from our collections, and I've got some other, I think Morgan is going to share with us some things that she's been able to research in our collections, and so I think that'll be really fun. And I've got some questions to ask the group as we look at these things and understand how we engage with print. But before I do that, I want to just make sure, does anyone have any comments or any, just any commentary or questions about things we've talked about already, or any experiences you've had visiting places about the history of print or anything like that? No? Okay, so we will go on. And again, feel free, of course, to put anything that pops into your mind in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and share some cool things. We're going to start with the book that we didn't get a chance to look at last week. Okay. All right. This one is a really great text. It was featured actually in a recent article that Strategic Communication did on the Bentley. This is our copy of Dante's Divine Comedy, about 1502. And one thing that I love about this, because this is a printed work, and here we see we don't have the black letter font that we were used to seeing with manuscripts or even with other early printed books that tried to emulate manuscripts. We're seeing an italic type, if you recognize that. Italic type was developed by Aldus Manutius, the founder of the Aldine Press, which this book came from, so which is really exciting. But I want you to take a look on the right side. You see a lot of writing in the margins, and this is called marginalia. So this, we've got a professor here at KSU who has done quite a bit of research on this 16th century Italian reader who made these marks in the book. And Morgan, do you want to share with us some things that you did some research on about this marginalia that this reader wrote?
So it was like a 16th century reader, and in the article,
Can you? We can't hear you that well.
Yeah. So the 16th century reader, Dover was actually able to find like the first and middle name of the person, and so I thought that was very interesting, and also that the person who was writing this was Chancellor of Marginia. And so I know that in here the person is talking about the La Lorena statue, Italian statue, and one of the popes, Pope Alexander VI. And so I think he's kind of like reading through this, and he's kind of comparing like his own like political, it seemed like he was kind of comparing his own political experiences with popes and with like current events with like Dante, because Dante talks about like a lot of people in his Inferno and Purgatory and Paradise and everything. He talks about a lot of different people that he liked and that he didn't like during his time. So when I was going through and looking at all of the marginalia in the book, I noticed that the reader was writing out like a lot of names of a lot of different characters, whether they were from like Greek mythology or from Dante's time. And so I think he was just really, he was kind of connecting to Dante on like a political level, because Dante kind of also was a political figure in Florence, or he was a politician and a political thinker as described by Dover. But those are some of the things that I noticed just looking through all the pages and looking at all the marginalia. He comes to like certain passages and he just like writes up like a whole entire page, and then other times he's just writing like little notes on like different people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we're getting a sense as to how a reader during that time would have interacted with the text. And oh, Tamara, do you have a comment too?
Yeah, just a real quick comment. Just you know, when we look at books usually from this time period, we're very used to seeing Latin.
Right.
You know, straightforward Latin that you know, sort of the common lingua franca of the time. I just love seeing the Italian language here, and when you think about Dante's sort of reputation in the 16th century, I mean, you know, Dante lived, of course, much earlier, but you can already see this sort of this constructing of this Italian kind of identity, national linguistic identity, and I think that's really interesting, because the thing about Latin is that it's generic. You know, it doesn't give you any kind of sense of the place, and so not only is it beautiful to see this type, it's beautiful, I think, to see the Italian language, and that I just find that kind of fascinating. Now, but it looks like the commentary is in Latin. Is that correct, Morgan? Do you know the marginalia?
That Yeah, I think he does write in Latin in some areas, and in other areas I was looking, and it almost looked like he also knew Greek a little bit too.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, he's I think that's probably because he was like a very like well-educated scholar. He was also kind of like a scholarly, like I think the reader is like very highly educated and stuff, so maybe that's why he was writing in like multiple different languages in the text.
Can I interject? Your points are really well taken, but on that last one, yes, academics were trained in Greek, Latin, in this case Italian, French, sometimes German. The idea was, if you have to speak about something in Italian, speak in Italian. If you want to speak universally, stop speaking Italian, continue to write or speak in Latin. Then if you want to go someplace and but so-and-so in Greece, an ancient scholar said, didn't speak in Greek. It is still done in the world. There are still universities where you'll have professors who'll be talking. I used to have a professor who was German. He would speak English unless he spoke about a German writer, then he spoke only in German. He would jump over into Italian when he spoke only Italian. And you just sat there and thought, what the hell? But he was interesting. But that's the same concept. Now let me show you something, because Tammy and Morgan, your observations are right on. This is an Italian. This is Italian typeface. The Venetians thought they were the only Italians. That's the reason italics is called italics. They didn't call it Venucio. They called it Italian. They didn't think anybody else on the boot had enough perspicacity to be called Italian yet. National states had yet to come into being. Now, what's interesting about this, and the more I look at it and listen to you all talk, I see something too that maybe Professor Dover ought to make have written on it too, is Italian is not Latin, and it's a perpendicular. It's meant to look like a new approach to writing in print face. It's very spacious. Look at those spacing between the words. In Latin, you won't find that. And then we're going to look at this person's marginalia. Yes, part of it's Latin. I think you're quite right. I see probably some Greek marks there too. But notice the spacing between the words. He has now changed Latin from Latin forms, where he runs letter by letter, running in one continuous stream. He's now making it phonetically into words. That's important. Now, what changed his writing style, I think, is the printing style. Tammy, you're talking about the beauty of its Italianate italics, because it's so spacious and individual words pop out. Now you've got a research topic here. Morgan, you might want to do a doctoral dissertation someday on this idea, how did this printing change how we learned to read Latin differently? And today, if you get a book in Latin, it has words very clearly lined up. But now you're looking at them as very differently from, say, Dante reading his Latin transcript or manuscript. Would have been only, if he's reading in Latin, only line after line of letter after letter with very few breaks. That's really, you all really have touched another important point. Joellen, you've done another great job here.
Oh, thank you.
Look at this, just in this page you chose.
Yeah.
I know you must have thought that they have a similarity. Words are standing out. Mm-hmm. Every other print early books in Incunabula in Latin, those early books didn't have any words. They just letters in rows. Mm-hmm. It gives you a headache because you have to read it phonetically. Every syllable has a sound that goes with another sound. Italian, that is to say, Venetian Italian, gave us a new style of writing, a new style of breaking words up. It really is that's impressive. Very good. Thank you all very much. I don't think I had thought about that ever.
Oh, well, that's what we're here for. And, that actually makes a lot of sense, because I was working with a Latin class a couple of years ago, and I noticed the professor didn't want his students to he knew that would be too hard for them to look at some of our Latin materials, like the medieval manuscripts and things like that, because they run together. There's so many abbreviations, but some of our later printed material in Latin, he's like, yes, they can look at this and they can understand this better because of the spacing and
They have words. They have real clear words. And see, that's what italics, that's one of italics' most famous things. Now, let's just go back. This is the second book ever produced by Aldous. His first one was on Virgil. And how's Virgil came from? He got his Virgil from Latin. And so he had to change Virgil into the traditional Latin into italics with individual words. Now with this one, he's got a man who's writing in Latin, and so he can make it very clear to read. So even he got the message very quickly. Skip from one year to the next. Let's get rid of the old way and start something new. And so it's revolutionary.
Absolutely.
That really is good. You all, both of you deserve to write a PhD dissertation on something.
Morgan, we'll get right on that.
Now, when you look at this page right here, you'll notice that on the left page, it's been cut out and put onto a new page, a different piece of paper, a very good piece of paper, a very good quality and very early piece of paper. But the book has been damaged. And so they repaired it about as good as you're going to ever get somebody to repair a book. They wanted it to look like it, but they also wanted you to see that the book had a flaw and they corrected it.
Absolutely. So that kind of prompts another question I have for the group. I'd love to hear from you all. One, do you write in your books? And if you do, which books do you write in? And you write in all of them or only some of them? My other question is, when your book is damaged, do you try to repair it? Do you try to put it back together? What do you do when a book in your collection is damaged? So either question, if you want to answer both or just one, I'd love to hear from you all.
Well, so I don't hear anything. I'm going to tell you, I write in all my books.
Me too.
Now, I only use pencil. I don't use fountain pen. But I'm not using a ballpoint pen.
So you said you're using pencil only, you said?
Only number two, pencil. It can always be removed.
Mm-hmm. That is
in case somebody thinks, boy, that's stupid.
I don't think anyone would think that. Let's see. Oh, yes. And feel free to put some in the chat. Let's see what we've got. Okay. Yeah. Tamika writes in some textbooks. Only repairs books and text services to our library. Very good. Got other folks that, so Catherine Meadows, it gets a duplicate copy. Rebinding to a valuable book.
I do that too.
Morgan
Sometimes I have two. One to write in and one to keep.
That's good. I really write in all my books. I have to restrain myself when I'm like when I have someone else's book, or when I have to remember this belongs to our department, not me, because I always want to write. I want to highlight. That's just how I engage with it. That's just me. Oh, Camilla can't write her books, takes separate notes. Yeah, Maureen writes, yeah, and everything. I agree. That's how I am. I just think that's so interesting how people interact with their books in different ways. I just love it.
Well, you know, Joy, I've told you this before. When I was a student in England, professor I had made a statement, and it has stayed with me my whole life, that you own a book, you should make it yours. So the world after you can see you have been there and thought about things. Mm-hmm. And he said that simplest way to start that is to put your name in your book. So I've done that almost universally. Yes, and then if I like something a lot, I make comments. I want the future to know how brilliant I was, or how stupid I was. Like the book you've got, you know, the book on Chaucer where the man writes, last night I read, he dated it. I read Chaucer, the good old book, and he didn't like on the astrolabe.
Yep.
That man, I want to drag him up out of the grave and talk to him. How can you be so foolish?
I know, it's so funny because you wish, and it's and like you said, it makes you want to engage with the previous reader and say, wait a minute, why do you have this view of the book?
But see, that's what books, printed books do. They allow us to have conversations. Oh, now you've got, that's important.
Yes. So I'm so glad I wanted to bring this one up too, because this is called a colophon. For those who aren't familiar with the term, it is a printer's mark. Now, in books that were quite early, I think books really before the 16th century, a lot of those books didn't have title pages like we're used to now. So you would find more of the bibliographic information about the book in the back around the printer's mark. This is a very famous printer's mark of the Aldine press, and so much so that people have even tried to fake it.
And Aldous changed it every year. It was to him like a medieval manuscript. Mm-hmm. Each year was the colophon was distinctive and told you what year he was doing. This is the 1502. There's only one before this. Now let me make a point. The colophon will develop itself over the next few years to say the person's name, where it was done, probably a year. Prior to about 1490, most books did not have a title page, a printer's mark, nothing. And you imagine trying to cite that? You know, you kind of have to, well, I got the book so-and-so. I mean, there's no way of explaining it. But now this one is by face value. The most important concept is that you have an identifiable printer's mark. You have this name and its symbol. And both of these symbols, the anchor and the dolphin, refer to Venice. You want to talk about and he wasn't Venetian, he was German. But the fact is that Venice was the most powerful Italian state, the most powerful nation state in the Western world. They were the largest trading state with the world. So you see the anchor, which is a symbol of Venice, and the dolphin, which is a traveling good luck symbol of the sailors in their great empire. They were the first true major seafaring nation state, the city of Venice. So wow. But you see, it's a kind of a personal statement of pride, Joel. You say, well, anybody can see that every year the anchor changes somewhat, or the dolphin changes. But you know, that's Venice. That's Italian. That's the real Italian. That doesn't count like Florence or Rome. Oh, no. They're not Italian. But Venice is. But what's the most obvious word or symbol in that colophon? ALDUS, his name. And that is, it really makes it possible for every publisher hereafter to say, I have a printer's statement or mark in my books.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It also tells you a little bit about his pride.
Yes, it
or
does.
Self-pride.
So anyway, I wanted to show that piece. We had many things to talk about there. Now, the next couple I'm going to kind of fly through just in the interest of time, but I wanted to show a couple more people who have written in their texts doodles and marginalia. This is a 1480, a leaf from 1480. It's a William Caxton leaf. So we learned about Caxton as the first English printer. So this is a leaf from his printing of the Chronicles of England. And I just thought it was so interesting that someone at some point drew this bird on the top and made some notes as well. So we see people have been doing that for a long time. And then we've got.
Joel, just hold that one moment.
Oh, hold it.
Look how that compares. Look how that compares with the Aldine.
Yes.
How the words are separate in Aldous, but this is one big handful to read. It's black letter too. It's what we call Gothic.
Absolutely. And it's hard. I mean, to be honest, it's harder to read.
Very.
It's just hard.
The reason it's hard to read is because you have to read it phonetically.
Yeah.
And that's not necessary. It sounds easy, but say you lived in Florence and you went to work in England for 40 years, you would find the English way of reading differently than you would in Florence or in Germany or in Spain. So all just solved a lot of problems with one set of alphabet and one recognizable typeface.
And yes, Andrew, it is in English. It's just in that black letter font, and it's sometimes difficult to even make out what it is. But this one is in English, from what I understand. Yes, this is in English.
That is Caxton's great claim too, the translating into vernacular.
Yeah.
But it does very difficult to read that way.
It is very difficult to read. And then I wanted to show this one. This is our 1524 printing of Pliny the Elder's Natural History, which was a seminal text and really kind of modeled, really became the prototype for encyclopedias. But we've got this little drawing here, this red, and it's actually a really good drawing.
It's a beautiful drawing. Can you enlarge that for us?
Yeah. Oh, whoops, hold on.
The tail on that is so great. It's oh look. But yes, look at it. It's an horary. It's a heavenly system. It's a heavenly star rolled at what they thought it was a concept of the universe. The detail work on that, the perspective, is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Geraldine, you and I have looked at that under a large magnifying glass before. It really is very detailed.
It is.
And I think he's answering something here about the constellations by looking at an horary. It's a beautiful celestial model of the heavens. It took a really trained eye and expert to draw that.
Absolutely.
It is beautiful. I mean, it is so beautiful. Sometimes you wonder, why didn't somebody cut that out? I don't mean to, Joel, don't do that.
No.
It
don't
is.
worry, I won't.
But it is really it's a good piece of artwork. Very talented.
Yes, it is. So it's
a lot better than that chicken or bird or turkey you had on the previous page.
Absolutely. And I wanted to answer a question in the chat, a footnote in the right margin. Oh, right here.
In the upper right margin above the drawing.
Okay, the upper.
You have some more margin there.
Let me get out of this. Let me see if I can. Oh, there we go.
So if you take your cursor down a little bit, Joy Ellen, keep going down, keep going down, keep going down, right there.
Oh, right here.
Because that's not part of the original text block. That's done on a different plate.
Yeah.
Right.
You see, the printing of this glossing is printed because they thought that was authoritative. Somebody made that note, and notice on this page, someone's also underlined a number of lines. And I think they probably relate to each other.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay. Great question, Lauren.
Thank you.
And see, that's a very good point, because you realize someone reading the original work and reading the commentary by someone people thought was definitive. And then someone made some notes, maybe such as they didn't know this or that or that, and they wanted to be certain what they were talking about, so they underlined those things in there. So, and then you wind up with the horary. So there again, Lori, that's a good, probably PhD dissertation right there if you would like to undertake it.
I'll get right on that.
Oh, right. Good. I'd like to understand what it actually means.
Thank you.
Remember, you got to hurry because I don't have a.
I'll only do it if you'll be my advisor.
Oh, I'd love that.
Like, okay.
You got to hurry because I'm getting up in years.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And then we see here, we've got, one thing I like about this piece too, is we see different we see that there's different people writing notes in this over time, because you can sometimes tell by handwriting, and sometimes the differences are subtle, but I just love that we can see different people interacting with the text over
Look
time.
at that one on that page. There's, look how many different hands you've got, Joellen.
I know.
Oh, there's a second dissertation right there, Joellen. You
Yeah.
you pick that one up. That's for you. Lori's got the other one. You got this one.
Everyone's going to be assigned a dissertation topic by the end of the session.
Oh, this is really interesting. You know, Joellen, being able to see this on the screen makes it very easy. I've sat down there with a magnifying glass, and it really gives you a headache to look at those things.
Mm-hmm.
This is very good.
Absolutely.
Look at 1, 2, 3. I see right off the bat at least 4 or 5 different hands in there.
So we see that printing, when printing became more popular, it didn't stop people from writing in their books and, and writing as a way of expressing ideas. So they work together. They formed a different relationship. So I love that. So I'm going to just move on just in the interest of time. But I wanted to show this one. This is our 1480. It's a book from 1489. I wanted to show a couple funny things about this. So on the left, we see binder's waste. We see, because the binding has been kind of removed or taken off, we see that a chant manuscript was used to bind the book, which is so cool. That was, this is not a music book, so it's unrelated to the text. But then we also see, if you look on the actual pages where my cursor is, you see these blank spots and these letters. These are called guide letters. So someone was supposed to make a decorative letter there. Usually that would have probably, been done by hand for someone, but all throughout the text, you see where my cursor is now on this next page, these letters were not completed. And it's just so funny. We see this, it's this kind of unfinished book here. And we can only imagine, I'm not sure what happened, or if it wasn't decided who would do that or what, but I think that is such an interesting piece of history there. We're not sure exactly what that's.
And you've got blank spots on each page,
yeah,
where it meant to have some kind of decorative insert there too.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you bought the book and then you paid somebody to decorate it for you.
And then, yeah, if this one, I guess they weren't able to get somebody to decorate it, or they forgot, or
the decorator was more expensive than they were going to pay.
They were going to pay, so they're like, nope, I'll just keep it the way it is. So I think that's understanding the choices people make with their books. And then this is from our second folio of Shakespeare, an excerpt from our 1632 folio. The interns and I were looking at this, and what we found so interesting and kind of funny about the second folio is first of all, we don't have the prologue, and we're going to have to do a separate session on the prologue, because I can't do it justice in the time now, but we're lacking that wonderful prologue that we all know. But what I really want to focus on is the various ways that Juliet is spelled. So we see that kind of the Romanized version, Romeo and Juliet, that's on the title. And then we've got this this J that looks like this. We got on this, and then on the next running head, we have the J that looks like this. And then here you see the I for the J, and that's on a different page. And then it's back to this one. It's just, I think it's so interesting. I wonder what why.
They had multiple type setters. They had to get it done. So you have different people who are using different types. Okay. You find like the I for J, that's the Latin J, because Latin doesn't have a J.
Yeah.
So that person decided to use the Latin version, and there are variations of this because they were using somebody else's type. They did not make the type for these books. They were using commercial type, and so they used what they had.
I see, and that actually makes sense too, because one of our interns, Abigail, was finding that about Latin not having I guess a J, and
a J or a U. They didn't have a U either.
Absolutely. So that makes sense. Because I was wondering, I was like, because I guess I'm thinking the same this is just like the same person, this type is
Yeah.
made for this, and I'm like,
No.
why would they make so many types and make it more complicated on themselves? But that makes sense.
If you look at the type on both of these pages you've got, they don't quite look like they've been worn the same way. The one on the left appears a little more used than the one on the right. So they were using commercial type. And if you don't have it, the printer always had the directive, find something that will work. And sometimes they just use a different letter. Sometimes you just misspelled the word. As you know, Joel, too, you'll have the F and the S look very different. And they sometimes just get used interchangeably.
That makes sense. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So last thing I want to go over, I know we're about out of time, but last thing I wanted to talk about was just our Mark Twain, because he's a funny one when it comes to oddities in print and changes. So here on the left is Mr. Williams's, this is the blueback huckleberry fin that he bought when he was young. One of the first books he collected. And then I've got another copy of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. These are both first edition. One is in blue, you see one is in green. But with Mark Twain's books, you have to collect quite a few books when you want to get a first edition, because they all have different points of issue, meaning changes that were made really without documentation. So one thing that I think is interesting, like here's just an example. This is from this one on the left, is from the blueback. And on page 57, there's a point of issue. It says it's talking about a saw, but it accidentally misspells it as was. So it says a hole in the bottom of it with the was. And then we see on page 57 of the greenback, oh, wait a minute, sorry. Of the greenback that we were looking at, which was printed later, they had fixed it by then. And so it says a hole in the bottom of it with the saw. So a student once asked me, when we had gone over all these points of issue, all these changes in Mark Twain's books, student was like, who cares? Like, why does this matter? And it was hard for me because I just think this is cool. And maybe that's just, I just think it's cool. But what really is interesting here is not just these changes, but really the context, the history behind it, and the circumstances surrounding, because Huck Finn, if I'm not mistaken, this was the first book that Mark Twain's own publishing company printed, because he was mad at all of his other publishers from his books before. He didn't feel like he was making enough money. He was annoyed at delays. So he said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my own my own publishing company. I think Charles L. Webster Publishing Company. I think his niece's husband maybe was I think the director. So I can almost sense this of desperately wanting to succeed, of ownership of this, and you see a mistake and you're like, no, we gotta stop and reprint them, and you want so badly for this to work, because you said, I'm going to do this myself and I'm going to do it better than any other publisher I've worked with before.
Gordon, that's a really great point, and it gives you an insight into the mind of Mark Twain. You see how he was determined to get it right.
Yeah. So that's some things that I just think about, but I know we're out of time, so I will stop. I'll stop sharing. We'll deal with that one next week. I will stop sharing, but I really hope that you all enjoyed looking at these interesting examples of print, and how printing isn't perfect. Even texts that seem like they're the most authoritative, or they're the first edition, they have a lot of issues and they have mistakes, and it's just fun to find them and to learn what influenced the circumstances behind these these issues. So anyway, thank you all so much for joining us today. Next week we're going to continue. We'll be in week 3 of 4 of our history of the book unit next week, and I'll keep it a surprise what we're going to talk about, but it'll be fun. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, this was really fun.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.